What is up, party people? Welcome to Best Ball Live, coming to you from parts unknown. Greg Sauce here, your host. With me on this episode or this show, Sammy Reid at Sammy Reid FI on Twitter. What is up, Sam? Welcome. Let's draft some best ball.
Thank you, good sir. I'm ready to do this. I'm excited. It is officially fantasy football draft season.
Yeah, it certainly is. And like we got Scott Fishbowl out of the way. I'm not sure if you're doing Razzbowl. Razzbowl's going right now. And yeah, I'm doing one of these every week. Like the best ball itch, man. It's like you can't scratch it enough, to be honest.
No, and I think best ball is just like doing a lot of these drafts in the preseason is like the best form of practice for your like big money drafts or your important drafts that always go like a week before the season starts, right? So yep. You can never like get in an actual mock draft and have it mean anything. People have to have a little skin in the game, and this is just a great way to get into it.
Yeah, and this is a great way for me to kind of scope into the mind of Sammy Reid for what you're going to do in our Barf League draft when that comes up. You are always one of my fiercest competitors in that experts league or analyst league, whatever you want to call it. And that's also Superflex. That's a 14-teamer, though. That one goes a little crazier than this. But we drew the 9th pick in this particular best ball. Typical roster construction, Sam, I'm not sure how much how many of these you've done. You're looking at like 3 quarterbacks, 5 to 7 running backs, 6 to 8 wide receivers, 2 to 3 tight ends. And you can skimp on the numbers or go a little heavier on the numbers at times if you want. It kind of depends on how you want to build your team, but these are generally the rubrics that we're aiming for. When you hear you have the 9th pick in a Superflex draft, is there a position you necessarily lean to? I mean, I should mention this is tight end premium, so guys like Travis Kelce, Darren Waller deserve a little bit more consideration in the early rounds. We talk a lot about that in these shows, but kind of at a base level in a Superflex, if you're kind of towards the end of the draft but not all the way down to the turn, what are you looking to do with your first couple picks or kind of the early structure of your draft?
I think so. A lot of times you will see in these drafts, like some of the premium running backs fall down here because people are addressing tight end, people are addressing quarterback early. In a lot of ways, especially in a super flex best ball like this, like I kind of want to leave one of the first with a quarterback with one of the first 2 picks. Mm-hmm. I tend to like to, and we've done this a lot in Barf, which obviously is a managed league, but we've had it a lot where, you know, we want to get like that anchor QB and sure. Then kind of play chicken with the other spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, we're seeing right here, like quarterbacks have gone with 3 of the first 5 picks. Dalvin Cook is not going to drop to number 9. So I'm curious to see, like, in a format like this, I'm super okay with like tight end quarterback or something like that. Like, should Kelce drop to that spot? So I think it's really interesting. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers news changes things a lot. All of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers is like fully in play with one of the first 2 picks.
Not to mention his teammates, right? Like Devontae Adams all of a sudden is a lot more secure as the first or second wide receiver off the board. Aaron Jones becomes a little bit more bankable as a commodity at running back. So yeah, it's big news with Rodgers kind of cementing his place there in Green Bay for the season.
Big time. So we see Kelce go off the board, number 6. That dream is squashed and kaput. Tough scene for us, but we will persevere, my friend.
So I'm going to pull the draft room back up here, and typically the way I navigate these is I pull the quarterbacks in the queue so we can compare to the other positions. Yeah. So right now we're looking at Dak Prescott as the top-ranked quarterback. And then if you want to look at running backs, you're looking at Derrick Henry, Zeke, Jonathan Taylor. I'm not sure if you want to think about Darren Waller, George Kittle, or look at the wide receivers. Like all the wide receivers are still available. Like what do you want to do with this first pick?
So I think I kind of lean toward Dak here. And you know, I think him and Russell Wilson are close, but I think by the time it gets back to us in the second, that tier is going to be gone. And I don't really like spending a second-round pick on a non-premium quarterback. You know what I mean? And kind of being forced into like Ryan Tannehill, who I like a lot. But being forced into that as my QB1 in the second round, that's kind of a tough scene. So the running backs at this spot, they all have warts. And that's kind of the cool thing about this format is you're not kind of like boxed into taking those guys. Derrick Henry in a PPR, dude, the guy's had 1 million touches. He doesn't catch passes. It's tough.
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott is getting dusty. Jonathan Taylor has competition, both for rushes and targets. Saquon Barkley, ACL surgery, may not be ready. Nick Chubb splits time. It's like none of these guys are perfect picks. And so I would rather take a bankable asset. I mean, I know Dak Prescott's coming off the injury, but I feel really, we saw what Dallas did when they were all together last year. And I just think that's a really, really good offense that we want to be a part of. And where we're at in the draft, it really sets up for potential stacking later. So,
yeah. And there is, I think, a clean tier break between Dak, the quarterbacks who went ahead of him in this draft, and then Russell Wilson being kind of that next guy in the rankings, mostly because of the pace we expect Seattle to play with. We expect them to be more run heavy, slower pace, kind of trying to control the game. Whether or not they can, whether or not their defense is up to that task is a different discussion. But in a neutral situation, in a baseline, we know that they want to be a little bit more conservative. And that's what I think puts Wilson as a little rung below those top 5 QBs. So I do think taking Dak there as the last guy available in that tier does make sense.
We're on deck. Show me the drafts, and now we're up. Show me the overall draft board. Okay, so I actually think that this is a pretty cool time to take Waller, in tight end premium, and really come out of here. There are, it kind of sucks not to have a back. If I were going to take one, it would actually probably be Eckler. I'm a big Eckler fan, but I think that once we get back in the third, we'll still have backs and receivers that we really like because they get pushed down in these formats. Whereas, Waller, especially in a tight end premium, is just a complete smash show.
For sure. And we've talked, like I mentioned the tight end thing in the first round when we were considering maybe Kelsey falling to us, and Waller in the second is essentially the same argument. I'm going to bring the roster construction kind of recommendations back up here. I say 2 to 3 tight end. The way you end up on only drafting 2 is if you get Kelsey or Waller or Kittle. But that's a dead horse that I flogged on this Best Ball Live show over and over again. We're not going to talk a whole lot more about that. Let's talk about some of these other early round starts from the other teams. I do like to kind of audit what the other teams are doing. We have the 10-spot drafter taking 2 straight running backs. The person in the 11 spot, bought into what we were saying about Aaron Rodgers, stacked him with Devontae. Down at the end,
over there. He's not mad at his start.
No. And then the 12 spot, Zeke and Russell Wilson. Like I mentioned how I did feel like there was a tier break between Dak and Russell Wilson. But, when you get to pair Russell Wilson with one of those top 5 running backs, I have a hard time saying no to that in Superflex, don't you?
Yeah, I like that start a lot. I'm totally in on it. I mean, Wilson is, at the end of the day, like he just always finishes well. And we're never quite sure what Seattle is going to do, right? Do they want to be run heavy? Are they going to let Russ cook? All these things. And, I think we saw a tale of kind of 2 teams from Seattle last year, right? They were letting Russ cook in the first half and kind of shut it down in the second. But at the end of the day, Russ always gets his. And I think he's a fine pick. I like Herbert a lot too. Like I'm pretty into the LA team in general. I really liked what we saw out of Herbert last year. Like I think he can do it. So when I see a team like I love Kamara and Tyreek Hill, but in this format, it's not something I would particularly do. But I really like the teams that get a onesie and then another elite guy somewhere else. So I like Kyler Eckler. I like Kelsey Herbert. I think that's really good. But
for sure.
Like I would not do Henry Taylor. That's just because, you're just missing out on the positions. So the way a normal fantasy league works is you can always wait on quarterback. You can always wait on tight end. In this format, you can't. Or you can, but you're really playing with fire, and the teams that get elite guys at those positions are way ahead of you. So it's a little bit of a different beast, and for that reason, I just wouldn't go that direction myself.
See, I go the other way on the double running back start. That's actually something I like. I like leveraging one position in a really heavy way with the first 2 picks in Superflex, whether that's double running back, whether that's double quarterback. I wouldn't do it with 2 tight ends, even though it's tight end premium, because again, if you're drafting Kelsey, Waller, or Kittle, you kind of expect that player to be in your lineup more weeks than not. Even double wide receiver is kind of intriguing to me. The downside to that here is that there are only 2 wide receiver spots in your starting lineup each week. Then there's the super flex. Then there's the regular flex that can also have wide receivers in them. but you're typically looking for a quarterback in your super flex spot. Your regular flex can be either wide receiver or tight end or running back. So really loading up on wide receiver early is basically the only one I won't do. And double tight end, obviously, but double quarterback, double running back. I like leveraging one position hard like that. If you feel like you have a good read on the middle rounds where you can, if you feel good about certain budget quarterbacks, essentially, then I'm okay with the double running back start.
For sure. And I am too, in a way. It's not my preferred spot, but I'd way rather, like, if I could do Dalvin Eckler from like the 4 spot or something like that, I'd be way more into it than the late first. It's fading the big dog is always scary. And I'm a big fan of Jonathan Taylor too, but these are guys with a lot of warts. Like, I want guys who catch passes if I'm going to do that. So it's got to be kind of a specific pairing that I'm into.
Now, for the uninitiated, the big dog that Sammy is referring to is Derrick Henry. Hat tip, the ETR crew, hat tip Evan Silva, hat tip Adam Levitan on not fading the big dog. You just can't do it. I do get what you're saying, though, because that group of running backs, those high-end guys who aren't McCaffrey or Cook, and I actually throw Zeke in there too, because despite what we all love about Tony Pollard, I think Zeke's going to get his. So, but if you're planting your flag on the next guys kind of around that tier or just below that tier and Henry and Taylor, you're kind of taking on a little bit more risk because those guys aren't quite as guaranteed as the top 2 or the top 3, whoever you think that those running backs are. But maybe this drafter thinks they are, and I think that's fine, especially considering what Derrick Henry has done over the past couple of years. Considering everything we're hearing about Jonathan Taylor, I kind of get it. But I see what you're saying, and I don't hate it, especially like you said, maybe if you end up with Herbert or Waller instead of Jonathan Taylor plus Derrick Henry, that's a little bit, at least it's a safer start, right? It keeps you a little bit more flexible for the later rounds, whereas this drafter who started Henry and Taylor might have to be a little bit more aggressive on quarterbacks or on tight end because they didn't sink that capital in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I think having an early pick in these drafts is pretty huge. I love what spot 1 and 2 have done. I mean, both of those starts are pretty fire to me.
Yeah, we talked about that last week when Jake Seeley was on the show. He basically said the same thing, and we were looking at the teams that were being drafted by the people in spots 1 and 2, and yeah, they were both insane. Like the third drafter had a really nice team too. Like even this one, like I'm not a big Tom Brady guy. I'm not a big Nick Chubb guy, but both those guys are good. And if you start with them after you get Josh Allen, like that's a quality team. Like the floor of that start is really, really high. And I know we talk about ceiling a lot in best ball, but with these early picks, you just can't throw them away is essentially what it comes down to. So even if Brady doesn't end up as like a top 3 quarterback, as long as he's a top 7 or top 8 guy, like this start, even though I'm not like in love with the player specifically, like the structure of it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So let's take a look at what's available to us.
So we got Waller. I'm gonna kind of executive decision say we're probably not taking another tight end. Right. We got the QBs in the queue, so you can kind of see who's available there. Running backs: Najee Harris, CEH, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, kind of top of the board. And then at wide receiver, we're looking at Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson.
So my personal tier, I would probably, if Najee Harris made it down here, he'd probably be my guy. I kind of have him a tier above the other guys. I do like CEH, but Najee, I just think Najee's like, if you're going to get like a full-time dude, and we have Najee. So I think we take Najee because, dude, he's going to get all the touches there. Whether or not you think Pittsburgh's going to be any good, he's just going to get all the touches. So to get like a legitimate bell cow with our first running back here in the 3rd round, that's great. I'd love to get a receiver like Ridley. Metcalf went before us, this and that. Jefferson I like. But I think Najee is a little bit different than the rest of the running backs that are still there. I mean, the wide receivers smashed, honestly.
There is like a clear tier of kind of top end wide receivers. There goes Calvin Ridley. I count him among that group. Just again, he's like the Najee Harris of wide receivers. He's just going to get so many targets in Atlanta. It's going to be sick. But I mean, you could say the same thing about Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, A.J. Brown, and even Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb. Like you can kind of keep going down and keep seeing these like number ones for their team, to the point where you don't have to necessarily take one here in the third round, especially when there is that potential bell cow in Najee Harris available. Are you at all concerned about the Pittsburgh offensive line with regard to Harris? Because that's the one sticking point where sometimes I lean CEH a little bit, because I like that offense a little bit more in Kansas City. And I trust their offensive line a little bit more than I trust the Pittsburgh offensive line.
I do too. I mean, obviously Kansas City is a far superior it is just a far superior situation overall. But to me, it just, it comes down to workload. It just comes down to workload. And I could be wrong. I mean, CH could outwork Harris, but I generally don't think so. Because I'm not worried as much about efficiency, right? I want the guy who's on the field all the time, who's just going to stack points every day. So we are on deck, and I think somebody just went that we wanted to take. AJ Brown.
CEH is gone, and let's see who else was recently drafted. Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, and then Stafford and Kirk Cousins went. So we could consider quarterback here as well. I think that there is this is how, FFPC ranks them. This is not necessarily how I would rank them or how you would rank them. I think that there is a little bit of a drop off here from, say, Trevor Lawrence, perhaps, to maybe the rest of this group. So that's a consideration. Again, the wide receivers here are studs, even though they're not the, tippy top of the tier. And then at running back, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, Deandra Swift, Chris Carson. What are you thinking with this pick?
Not running back. So
I agree.
So I would probably prefer to get a wide receiver, and I hate to be so boxed in, right? Get a quarterback and then a
we've got one of each so far. Do the Skittles start.
AJ Brown just went, so that's tilting. That's kind of the guy I would like. So we can do one of two things. I guess we got 20 seconds. I think I want you to pick between Robinson and McLaurin. You make the choice.
Okay, I'm going to go with Allen Robinson.
Cool.
The dude just never is bad, despite having terrible quarterbacks all the time. And maybe his quarterback will be good this year. Maybe. We'll see.
Right. So I would really like to stack here and take CD Lamb. I think that's a big consideration. But at the end of the day, I just feel like McLaurin and Robinson are better. And what you don't want to do with stacking is force the stack. Now,
totally.
It's certainly possible that Amari Cooper makes it back, because Cooper's kind of been falling lately because of some of his concerns. I would not mind stacking there at all. I think that Michael Gallup a little later for value makes a really natural stack with Dak. We'll have opportunities maybe taking our second tight end from Dallas in that sense. I'm a big CD Lamb fan, but I think Allen Robinson and even McLaurin are just kind of a big. You're projecting a big jump for CD Lamb to put him in that tier, right? Which is fine, because I think CD Lamb is fully capable of it. But at the end of the day, those guys are already there.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of backed into the argument against Lamb over those guys and saying, look at these other receivers we could stack Dak with and still be happy. Because we know that Amari Cooper, when he's healthy, is going to see targets. We know that Michael Gallup, even though he's not going to see quite as many as Lamb or Cooper, Gallup is going to see his fair share of targets. Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz are going to get there. Zeke is going to catch them out of the backfield. That's going to be a prolific offense because it's so well diversified. Whereas when you take Allen Robinson, his primary competition is Darnell Mooney, and Darnell Mooney's great. I'm wishing the best for him this year too, but he's not Allen Robinson.
He's not an alpha. He's not an alpha. And Allen Robinson is an alpha, proven alpha, known alpha.
And there aren't those third and fourth guys on Chicago that are going to, in certain weeks, siphon away more targets from A-Rob, like we're going to see Gallup and Cooper and Jarwin and Zeke do to CeeDee Lamb. Right. Not to say that CeeDee Lamb's highs aren't going to be just as high. I'm sure they will be. But that steady production, that every week sort of contribution, I think is more likely from a player like Allen Robinson, where the target tree is a little bit more condensed.
For sure. I wonder if Team 5 wrestled with taking Hopkins over Mixon. He chose Mixon and Hopkins went with the next pick. The guy took Kyler in the first.
Yeah, it's possible. But I think that's a concession to the format. You only have to start 2 wide receivers. So as much as you want DeAndre Hopkins to stack with Kyler Murray, you kind of like if the bell cow potential running back and Joe Mixon is there, you make that pick. So I agree with that tack, especially because like we talked about with Dak, like there are later stacking options with Murray, and they're all really affordable. Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, AJ Green, if you want to buy that bounce back. Like there are ways you can stack with Kyler that aren't DeAndre Hopkins. And so I think that has to enter the calculus as well.
Yeah.
Before we get into round 4 here, I want to let everybody know that if you go to 4for4.com, you sign up for any of our plans, you will receive a voucher to use at the FFPC worth up to $35. This is a $35 Superflex Best Ball Slim that we're drafting today. There are other 1 quarterback options. There are Superflex and 1 quarterback options that aren't slim, which means they include kickers and defense. So head over to 4for4, get subscribed, and then you'll get to do a free draft on us. Sammy, now that I've got my plug out of the way, is there anything you're working on lately? Anything you want to plug before we get to our pick here in the 5th round?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing, I've kind of stopped doing as much content over the last couple seasons as I've had more and more kids. My daughter's 18 months old, and then we're expecting a second right around Super Bowl time. So
that's news to me, man. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Vasectomy time for me coming up here. But yeah, so I've kind of just decided to spend a lot more time trying to win leagues and do that instead of do content. So we'll continue, me and Davis Maddock and Nate Nolan will continue to do the Gillcast that's on the RotoGrinders podcast network.
Nice.
Every week. You can hear us tilt our DFS teams. But other than that, like I've kind of started like taking a little step away from like making as much content and just trying to make more time for the fam. So
I'm right there with you. I mean, this is basically all I'm doing. It's this plus the 2 QBs draft guide, which is the launch of that is imminent, people. If you are interested in the Superflex format, if you're interested in 2 QB leagues, we are going to have a draft guide coming out sometime within the next week, fingers crossed. Has a bunch of great articles from awesome contributors. We got a mock draft in there with a ton of heavy hitters from around the industry. Here I go plugging something again. I said I was done with my plugs.
Well, I mean, look,
go ahead.
You've been banging this drum for years, as
sure.
Have, a lot of sharp folks. But Superflex is the future of fantasy football. I mean, we've talked about it before, but the reality is quarterback is not just the most important position in football, but probably the most single important position in all of sports. And so a format that rewards quarterbacks for more than just being like dinky late round picks that you can stream.
Look at this draft board. Look at this draft board. Isn't this great? Like quarterbacks.
This is awesome. This is how it should be.
Yeah. Quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends in the first round. The only critique I would have on this draft board and this format is make me start more wide receivers. So I have to consider the elite wide receivers in these first 2 rounds the same way I consider the elite guys at the other positions.
Yeah. But, so we're pissed. Matt Ryan just went. We're kind of bummed about that.
I was watching these QBs fall, and I was like, man, Trevor Lawrence down here at the 4 or 5 turn. 2 is I think a little bit of a reach, but I don't hate it, especially if you got these 3 picks in between your 2 QBs. But man, like these 3 quarterbacks all in a row here to start the 5th round all seem like nice values to me, Matt Ryan included.
For sure, and you got to think this guy is about to smash a quarterback, like he's kind of got to.
Yeah, it's always hard to know how many people we're drafting with or watching the stream, because when I post the tweets that are like, hey, sign up for this league, here's a link to the stream, come hang out. It's like we talk about which guys we want. We talk about what other drafters are doing. Like you have to be mindful that some people are willing to snipe us. I don't mind it because, again, if someone takes a player that I wanted, it forces me to think on my feet, to react. And again, in preparation for my managed leagues that are kind of with the drafts coming up later this offseason, like you need to be able to do that in the moment. So anyway, I don't mind like if someone's watching the stream and someone snipes me, because it's good practice for what's going to come later. But we're on deck here. I'm sorry I started cutting you off and rambling.
That's all right. Let's take a look at what we got going here. So obviously, plenty of. What's your Miles Sanders take, man? I'm not sure I'm that in on him right now.
I'm not either, but at this point in the 5th round, can you do better than him with these other running backs? And that's not to say it's like the correct choice to say, oh, like Miles Sanders is probably as good as these other guys. Let's just take Miles Sanders, because probably as good as like the probabilistic notion that he's definitely better than them is different than him being probably as good. Do I see a big drop off from him to like Mike Davis, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, Miles Gaskin? I think they're all pretty close. So yeah, I
think I might like Darrell Henderson over all those guys.
Agreed. Actually, and I forgot to bring him up because he's still buried in the ADP. He actually would be my pick here, I think.
I'm kind of leaning that way, bro. Like,
let me pull up the wide receivers just so we can see them.
Yeah.
Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, T. Higgins, kind of the top of the board.
But again, one of these guys comes back is the thing.
Totally,
so go back to quarterback real fast.
Yep. Check out the queue on the right-hand side here.
Yeah. Nobody I really love. I think we can play some more chicken. I want to play chicken. Let's take our boy Henderson.
Yeah. So I hate to like put it in these terms, but how much of Cam Akers' fantasy value do you think Darrell Henderson is going to approximate this season? Is he going to be 90%, 75%, 60%? Like, because that has to factor into your decision to draft a player like Darrell Henderson.
100%. I mean, it really comes down to, do they sign somebody else or not? If they don't, I think you're like in a 80, 90% range. And if they do, you're more in a 60% range, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really depends. I'm not smart enough to know what they'll do, but all you can kind of do is like, what's on the board right now. And we're even at the point they've started camp and everything. We're even at the point they sign a fucking veteran. Sorry, they sign a veteran, like, whatever, Carlos Hyde type or whoever. It's not like that guy's just going to like be a full snipe. I mean, let's not forget that
they're not better than Darrell Henderson. That player's not on a roster already. Like, Darrell Henderson is on a roster. Like, there's a reason for that. It's because Darrell Henderson's a good football player still in like the prime of his career. He was good last year. He was really good when he had that gig to himself.
He was good, and he was good in college. Uber productive. So,
albeit with an insane offensive line. Yeah. That's, I think, the one grain of salt I always have to throw at the Darrell Henderson college truthers is like the holes he was running through were massive, like these huge gaps. So file that away. But he's good. And the Rams offensive line is pretty good too. So it's not like he's going to be running in tight little spaces on this team. Like, it's a good situation. That's why we like Cam Akers too. Now that Cam Akers is out of the picture, Darrell Henderson has to be in your early round considerations.
Let's go draft board real fast because we're on deck. Let's see what's happened. Jacobs, Etienne, Julio, Sanders, Wentz went. Okay, so this is actually a pretty tough spot right here. Back to QB, so we can definitely play a little bit more chicken. I mean, honestly, like,
well, let's pull up the draft board. Everybody behind us here has 2 except for 2 drafters. Team 7, Team 4 have only drafted 1 QB. So yeah, I mean, maybe some of these people start taking their 3rd, but we're going to get one of these quarterbacks is coming back to us in the next round, most likely.
Let's play chicken. Let's see what happens. Let's just take best position player available and just see what comes back. Like, dude, everybody hates Ben Roethlisberger. He always falls. Like,
yeah,
never mind. Ben Roethlisberger
just went.
Solid mush, Sammy.
Yeah, so I think wide receiver is probably where you're getting your most bang for your buck.
Yep.
Running back, I don't mind Mike Davis, Javonte Williams, Miles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds, even like down here, Trey Sermon. Like, this tier of running back I'm fine with. I know some people don't like to draft in this zone. Tight end, I don't think we want to pair one of these guys with Waller. But what do you think? We are on the clock. I'm sorry.
No worries. I just want to make sure we don't get auto drafted. I think we probably take best receiver. Gosh.
Pull the draft board again here. We have one receiver already.
Best receiver available. I think Evans is mighty fine for our purposes.
Yep. Yeah, that's the wide receiver I would have taken in this spot. I think there's some arguments to be made for other guys in this range, but kind of like Allen Robinson, Evans is a pretty consistent producer, and we know he's going to catch touchdowns. And
he is, and he's also capable of big games. And we like that in formats like this. So he's never like a guy like I'm like, gosh, I'm so pumped to get Mike Evans, but the guy produces just like always. So I feel good about our team, dependent on what happens with QB2 on our way back. So,
right. Yeah. And the real problem here is that on the way back in round 6, like even this round, nobody has to worry about us. But on the way back, if people are auditing the draft board, they're going to see that we only have 1 QB.
Right.
And they can leverage that. They can say, okay, we're going to take our third QB just to screw that one drafter. Now that means that more value at some other position falls to us, and maybe that's okay, especially if we're comfortable taking more of the bargain basement QB options. And generally I am. That's kind of just the type of drafter I am. I think last year in Barf, I handcuffed Tyrod Taylor with Justin Herbert. I've done
you did indeed, sir. You did indeed. And
I've done the Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett handcuff before in leagues past. So I'm okay taking a shot on that guy who just might win a job because they might win the job.
Trey Lance and then Jimmy G later because nobody's drafting Jimmy G early, right?
Yeah.
You can do things like this. So
I would expect Lance to be picked before it gets back to us, mostly because the hype around him has been pretty high. Although recent reports, I mean, they're doing that coach speak thing where they're like, Jimmy Garoppolo's the starter, period. And I don't buy it. Sorry.
Yeah. So this will be really interesting. I think we definitely need to get a QB with one of our next two picks. So I'm really interested to see what these guys do. But Mike Evans is kind of a low end wide receiver 1, I think. And so to get him as our wide receiver 2, already having 2 running backs that we like, already having an elite quarterback that we like, I think so far we're doing pretty good, especially considering we got Darren Baller in there.
That's right. And the fact that we now have 2 wide receivers means that we can punt on that position for a couple rounds if we want to. Now, there are probably still going to be some really good wide receivers available to us in the next few rounds. So chances of us completely avoiding the position are relatively low. But we have that freedom to be able to say, okay, let's take another running back and a quarterback. Let's take 2 quarterbacks in a row. These sorts of things are available to us. But as you can see, these quarterbacks are starting to go. One of the drafters who only had 1 has now taken their second. I missed that number 6 drafter earlier. Yeah. And then the person on the 5 spot here is now 3 quarterbacks on their team.
Yeah. Yeah. He got his third. I'm curious. So team 4 snap takes Godwin instead of the second QB, but he sees everybody behind him with 2 QBs. So I think he's playing a little bit of chicken too.
Yep.
Sure.
And
I like it.
I don't fully love the playing chicken analysis at this point in the draft because kind of no matter what, there's going to be a locked-in starter available to us in the next round. And that's really kind of, to me, what the lower quarterback tiers are all about in a Superflex or 2 quarterback draft. After I have my starter, and hopefully I get a QB2 that I like, it doesn't always happen, whoever that third QB is just needs to be a warm body who's going to fill in for bye weeks. And if, God forbid, one of my starters gets injured, is going to be available to me as a backup to those in the case of injury.
Agreed with that.
So if it's Jared Goff, it's Jared Goff. I don't want to draft Jared Goff, but I'm willing to do it. And that's what there's this fear in 2 quarterback drafts of having that player on your roster that I don't want to say it's completely unfounded because it's not great having those guys rostered, but it's not as big of a deal as many drafters make it out to be, I feel.
I think that's true. And we've kind of done this ourselves in Barf as we compete against each other, that we've taken that strategy quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I think last year I actually didn't take a QB till round 5 in that draft. I actually forewent an early QB, which was a little off brand. But sometimes you just gotta chance it. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody cares about having a nice, solid, okay team. You're really looking to knock your draft out of the park, and the way you do that is by taking some chances at certain positions. So I'm not averse at all to taking some risk.
And you do that by having a complete roster. And the easiest way to have a complete roster is to have a balanced roster, to have good running backs, good wide receivers. And if you take 3 quarterbacks in the first 5 rounds, you're foregoing that value at running back or at wide receiver, or in this format at tight end. And so that's why we paid up for Darren Waller. That's why we drafted these 4 other position players before we took our QB2, because we'd rather be more dominant, against these other rosters at the non-quarterback positions, because Jared Goff exists, because Jared Goff is a warm body who will put up fantasy points no matter how bad that Lions team is.
Yeah. So let's take a look. We're up in 4 picks. Let's take a look at what's available to us.
So running backs, Javonte Williams, Chase Edmonds, Trey Sermon. I'm going to skip over Cam Akers, Raheem Mostert, James Robinson, Michael Carter. Some interesting guys there. Wide receiver, skipping over Michael Thomas here. We got Deontay Johnson, Kenny Golladay, Brandon Ayuk, Odell Beckham, Cortland Sutton, Chase Claypool, Devonta Smith. Like, wide receiver still loaded.
Wide receiver still loaded. I continue to stand. I'm probably higher than market on Deontay Johnson. I just love
you
guys.
say that, but I feel like every person I have on this show says that. There's like, yeah, I love Deontay.
Well, you have sharp guests, so
totally, it's good to be aligned.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think Deontay Johnson has somewhat of a reasonable chance of outpacing his odds of leading the NFL in receptions. I don't think he's like a favorite by any stretch, but
no.
I love guys like him, Jerry Jeudy, who are like young. You can see they're uber talented, but they had some inconsistencies and some drops, and it's like, that stuff clears up. Like, look at the list of great wide receivers who used to struggle with drops. You know what I mean? That it's not something I'm concerned about. So I don't really see any of the running backs. I am intrigued by Javonte Williams, but I just think we're entering this zone where the wide receivers available are just clearly better in a vacuum than the running backs available. And then as far as quarterback goes, I think it would be probably prudent to take one.
I agree. I think QB is more scarce than wide receiver at this point.
Yeah.
So which one of these guys do you like?
I don't like any of them.
Sure. Which one do you want to draft? Let me rephrase.
I think it's probably Derek Carr.
It's the safest pick, I think. I agree with you there. And we're stacking with Waller, which I think gives a lot of incentive to pick him here.
Yeah, I mean, I can just see. I mean, Carr's actually like kind of upped his efficiency the last couple seasons.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna pick him. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so he's upped his efficiency, but he's also that team's bad, and bad teams are forced to throw more. You definitely don't want like the team to be so awful, but at the end of the day, I think he's gonna just have a lot of throwing opportunities. And like you said, I really like the natural stack with Darren Waller. I think that's a good thing. I'm not big on. Maybe I'm stupid for not being big on Zach Wilson, but I probably like Darnold better. I actually kind of like Darnold. I'm like kind of intrigued by Sam Darnold.
I am also, mostly just because of what we saw Bridgewater do with that offense last year without Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. Throw McCaffrey back in there. I know Darnold, we have no proof that he's good, like zero proof to this point.
That is correct.
So that's like the scary part about drafting him. But again, like he's moving from like the worst possible situation with Adam Gase to a pretty darn good situation with Matt Rule in Carolina in that offense. It is Matt Rule, man. I've just spouted that off. I think that's correct.
Yeah. So Deontay Johnson went, which is definitely
sad.
Hurts.
Pour one
hurts
out.
the heart a little bit. So let's what's going on at tight end? I just want to check back in.
Yep. So we got Fant, Logan Thomas, Higbee, Gesicki, Tanya, and Irv Smith as the top of the rankings. I mean, if you ask me, I think we keep waiting on tight end.
I do too. I like these guys, but there's no like faller that it's like, gosh, we really got to have this guy.
Running back, I meant to mention this last round when you were talking about how none of the guys really stood out to you. I think if Chase Edmonds had made it to us, that would have been the one guy I might have made the argument for. Because again, like potentially high-powered offense, catches passes, goal line work, a little nebulous, but that's baked into the cost of drafting Chase Edmonds where he goes. But we're on deck here. Do you like any of these running backs? I'll pull the wide receivers back up too.
I'm kind of paring it down between taking a guy like Kenny Golladay. Where I do like Golladay. Like Galladay's pretty good, but I think honestly, like, just look down the list. Like Jerry Jeudy comes back, like Mike Williams, Deebo Samuel, Sharp, like these guys are all pretty good too. And I think when you wait on your second quarterback, it's often good to be one of the first ones to take a third quarterback.
Double tap, baby. Yeah, we'll see if it happens. Now, are you so set on double tapping that if Darnold, who we've both expressed interest in, if he gets drafted just ahead of us, do you just immediately default to Zach Wilson? Or at that point, like if Darnold's gone, you go, okay, now maybe I will take Kenny Golladay or one of those other wide receivers?
No, I think I would probably stick with quarterback. Just the way the structure looks. And let's check out our bye weeks real fast.
I just did that. We're clear to take either one. So if you prefer Darnold, he's the guy. If you prefer Wilson, he's the guy.
I think, maybe it's foolish, but I think I prefer Darnold. I like the weapons that are going on in Carolina. I think everybody gets a boost when they get out of when they get out of the Adam Gase tree
every time.
Yeah.
So here's our draft board. Let's review the team. At this point, we've got a full starting lineup. We really did that most generic possible thing. We have 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end. That covers all of our standard spots and our super flex. We have like one other generic flex available, so I guess we don't have a complete full lineup. But again, locking in that third QB to offset waiting for our second QB makes a lot of sense. I think it's worth, punting your flex spot one more round, even if it is like a long wheel before it gets back to us, to secure that quarterback scenario.
Yeah.
Now,
and
with 3 quarterbacks drafted,
we'll see a lot of guys coming around here at the other part taking their third guy. I mean, I feel pretty
have to at this point.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other thing I like about the double tap, is it kind of forces the hand of the room to some extent, where at this point now you are potentially facing not having a locked-in starter as your third guy. You might have to take Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. And if you hit on the right player, like, that's fine. But if you hit on the wrong player, it could tank your season. You never know, especially best ball, because you're not going to be able to make pickups during the season. So I'm going to clear out the quarterbacks from the queue. I don't think we're going to take another quarterback anytime soon, if at all. I'm going to put running backs in the queue now, and we'll just compare running back in the queue to wide receiver and tight end in the draft widget over here. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about kind of your baseline strategy, not just for Superflex, but for best ball, because different people approach these things in different ways. Like, do you tend to steer into like a hyper fragile approach or a 0 RB approach or anything like that when you do these, whether it's 1 QB or Superflex?
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly in big overall contests, which I think a lot of people are getting after, I think in those contests, I like to kind of be hyper fragile with it, because at the end of the day, you need a lot of things to go right for you to even like get in the conversation among the top teams. So I like constructing in a way that like is fairly likely to bomb out. And, if injuries happen, you're screwed. But if they don't, you have this monster of a team. So I'm willing to like forego depth at, certain positions, only draft like 4 running backs or something like that, and just say, I need these guys to stay healthy. If they don't, this team is dead. But if they do, I'm in such a good position. And so I think in overall contests, it's just like a GPP and DFS, right? You're willing to take more chances because the payoff for things going right is so great. You don't want to dilute yourself with safety. Like, the safety is kind of an illusion in many ways. Whereas if you're just playing like, a regular 12-team league where, the top 3 cash, or you're playing like a 50-50 style contest, you want to just go safer and solid. And so I think the format really dictates that. But I like going hyper fragile and just like throwing it to the wind and giving myself a path for alignment.
All right, so I've loaded up about 30 running backs in the queue. We might have to restock that at some point. But I think at this point in the draft, with our 3 quarterbacks secured, we're, for the most part, going to be weighing wide receiver versus running back with most of the rest of our picks, or most of the next few picks. And then we can talk about a second tight end, maybe a 4th quarterback if we want to get really frisky. But let's pull up the draft board again and do another quick audit of what these other folks are doing.
Yeah.
We talked about how we like being in the early spots. I think looking at these squads, it's clear why those early spots are good.
Team one is a smash show. I think Team 1 is freaking killing it. I think that's great value on Andrews in the 6th.
Lockett too. I really like that pick. Lockett at the end of the 7th is kind of like printing money.
100%. 100%. Lockett's another one of those guys that like people like don't like because they think he's like inconsistent and this and that. But like Lockett always finishes with a bunch of yards and good totals. And you can't really dictate when those things happen. So I'm a big Lockett fan, especially where he's going right now.
I kind of like what's going on here in the 4 spot as well. Dalvin, Kittle, I like that start. Hurts, I'm like kind of lukewarm on, but again, where you have to draft him, that's about it. Deandra Swift, I also have concerns about, but again, 4th round, I'm okay with it.
I'm putting it out there. I'm not on Team Swift.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Why is that?
I just don't want to draft a running back highly who's on a terrible team and not going to get all the touches. But
you don't think best ball smooths that out a little bit, because at the very least he should be their primary pass catching back, right?
He certainly should. He certainly should be. But at the end of the day, I think that I don't mind the player himself. I think Deandra Swift is a good player, but he's got 2 major check marks against him, and that's usage, and that's also a lack of touchdown upside. It's just
the TDs is a good point. Like, that's something I talked about last week. That's my biggest concern, is that he's just not going to score enough to have like the really big blow up weeks.
Right. Here's the thing. I don't think at the end of the year you're going to look at DeAndre Swift's numbers and be like, God, that guy was terrible. I don't think that's the case. I just think you're going to look at the other players around him, Terry McLaurin and Robert Woods and, Allen Robinson and these kind of guys, and be like, I should have just taken one of those 1,000-yard receivers, who had 80, 90 passes. I just think that'll serve you a whole lot better.
That's fair. We are on deck here, so we'll pull the draft from back up. Running backs on the right. Actually, let's get Cam Akers out of there. We don't want to draft him. And then wide receivers currently showing on the left. There's a lot more security in picking a wide receiver here. These roles are well established, I believe, even as much as like a rookie in Devonta Smith can have his role established. Whereas you look at these running backs and it's literally all committee guys at this point. It doesn't mean we can't take a running back or shouldn't take a running back here, because it's about relative value, but that's what we're looking at. I'll pull up tight end too, just to be fair. Irv Smith, Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, Adam Troutman, Gerald Everett is the top of the ranks there. I don't see a clear standout there. Maybe you do, but what are you thinking with this pick?
Don't love it. I think the best players here are wide receivers, and I'm actually a big Devonta Smith fan. Really like him. I'm a Juju, not a fan, but I think he's good.
He's underrated.
I might default toward Robbie Anderson here to create our stack with Darnold. And I just think Robbie Anderson, bro, he's money. He's just good. He's just a good player. And so when I have a group of guys who I kind of all like, all these guys, I think I would default toward the stack pick.
No, I agree with that. And I mean, the funny thing about Anderson is we actually have seen him be good with Darnold. That's one of the few known commodities in that Carolina offense. Now, again, this is a different, like, the offense is going to be structured differently than the last time those two played together, but there's some mild amount of chemistry already there. Robbie Anderson was good last year on his own. This is I think a good spot to take him. I agree with you.
Yeah, we like Robbie Anderson. On the Gilcast, Nate Noling was just regularly playing Robbie Anderson over DJ Moore at like similar prices. And for the first, he
must have smashed doing that.
He was printing.
Yeah.
Just Robbie Anderson's closet good, man. And he actually added like a lot more to his route tree. He was kind of like this, like kind of a solo deep threat for a while. And last year they were running him on a lot of like short and intermediate stuff and giving him things that you'd expect like DJ Moore to do. They were really doing that with Moore and Robbie Anderson. And I just think, I think Robbie Anderson's a good player.
So we've got two stacks so far. We stacked Waller with Derek Carr. We stacked Robbie Anderson with Sam Darnold. I like both of those. You don't necessarily have to stack all your picks, especially with a player like Dak. Like, a lot of the reason Dak is so valuable is because he adds rushing production.
Right. And we're kind of in this spot where I don't think Gallup is necessarily the best pick. Like, I think.
Yeah, I like a lot of these receivers more.
Yeah. So I don't think we should jump. We're actually on the clock here.
Do you force it with a running back? Do you want to take a second tight end? Like, what do you think?
I don't know if Zack Moss is actually forcing it. I tend to find myself liking Zack Moss a little bit.
Okay. Good offense. But
I also like Juju and Mike Williams.
What was your first instinct? You know, they say when you take a multiple choice test, your first reaction is usually the correct one. Like,
it was Zack Moss.
Okay.
It was actually Zack Moss. And, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, I think Zack Moss is like just a complete smash, and I think he takes over the job 100%. But I kind of feel like Buffalo likes Moss more than Singletary. And we kind of saw in like some of the games they were healthy last year, they were using Moss like a lot more in some of the leveraged spots. And that the running back position for Buffalo is never going to be amazing because Josh Allen is like
total
when they're near the goal line, they just let him do his thing, which is great. But I think Moss has a pretty good chance of like being their goal line guy and kind of taking over a lot of the work in that backfield and being like a 2-to-1 guy. I think it's possible. So,
yeah, and we talked about kind of how wide receiver is less important in this particular format. This is the part of the draft where you are forced to make those kind of picks that feel wrong when you like to pick Zack Moss over some of these wide receiver names, like just kind of more predictable producers, more proven producers. I feel like even as far down as Jarvis Landry, like we know what Jarvis Landry is going to do this year. We don't really have any idea exactly what Zack Moss's season is going to look like. Same with Melvin Gordon, same with Tony Pollard, James Conner, Gus Edwards. All the running backs that are left here are kind of in that nebulous will they, won't they range. And so you have to, at some point, plant your flag on those running backs. Now, you can keep kicking the can down the road for a while, but if you do that too long, then you're looking at the true, like, no-name running backs or no-role running backs where you're actually hoping for an injury as opposed to, like, some standalone value.
Yeah, so, and I hate those guys like Madison, right? It's just like, dude, Madison's like a top, 10 or 12 running back if Dalvin Cook gets hurt. But without that, he really doesn't have any value at all.
And I would argue, I don't know if he is. Like, the last time we saw him thrust into that sort of role, he was losing touches to Amir Abdullah.
Yeah, that was very tough. That was very, very tough scene for Madison truthers. But I also look, and I kind of look at it like this, where I kind of like Moss over a lot of the other guys on this list in terms of like getting consistent work. And there will still be receivers in this tier. Yeah. So it's not necessarily that I like Moss over the receivers here. It's just that I think the drop off from like the guy we would get at our third running back is going to be more significant than if we wait a receiver.
Yeah, the receivers, kind of all of them we're looking at this point are either wide receiver 2s or wide receiver 3s, or they're wide receiver 2s or 3s that are miscast as wide receiver 1s, right? And for the most part, like, you're going to be able to mine value out of this group one way or another. So I agree. Like, in that spot, I think it was correct to take a running back. I like Zack Moss for all the reasons you said. Like, we know he's going to get some amount of work. We know that that's a good offense who's going to give him opportunities to run the ball when they're ahead and to potentially score some touchdowns when Josh Allen isn't vulturing all of them. So, yeah, the pick made a lot of sense. And I think you could make similar arguments for someone like Gus Edwards, for someone even like Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones, maybe even A.J. Dillon, considering the way –
I'm warming up more on A.J. Dillon because the Packers have really shown that they are not going to give Aaron Jones like just a bell cow role. Aaron Jones is going to get high quality touches and this and that, but they're not going to like stuff him with 25 touches a game. They're going to change it up. I think Dillon like showed enough in his time last year that he is going to have some standalone value, especially in best ball where you don't have to guess which weeks those will be.
I think one of the more intriguing running back options is David Johnson, because we've seen him be great. We've seen him be pretty good. We've seen him be terrible. And the Texans added a lot of running backs. The Texans are another team like the Lions that you don't really want to heavily invest in. But if David Johnson is the primary back and the primary pass catching back in a bad offense where they're going to be playing catch-up mode a lot, like, I feel like the floor of David Johnson is very safe. So he can fit a certain type of roster construction really well, where if you just need that warm body who's going to give you like 6 to 14 points every week with not a whole lot of upside for like the big 20+ point weeks, like I like David Johnson more than James White. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So there's something there, and he's going super, super late. At the same time, it's just hard to stomach because, again, Houston Texans, like, who wants anybody on that team aside from Brandon Cooks?
Very, very tough scene in Houston right now. Where are we on the draft board here?
On the draft board,
the receiver queue getting demolished. So I'm like, how close are we?
It's that part of the draft for sure, where We
Yeah,
saw
so team one just smashes his turn again. Team one is nutting this draft right now, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I really like it. No third quarterback, which is a bit of a downside, but when your wide receivers are this good, there might be some weeks where these wide receivers outscore one of these QBs for the Superflex spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's still some guys out there that, is Jared Goff still on? No, Jared Goff went. Cam Newton just went. Okay. That's getting pretty thin. Jameis Winston went. Taysom Hill went. Okay. It's officially thin, team one.
I like what team two has done a lot. I mean, Mahomes obviously is great. Diggs, a very good wide receiver. Gibson and Dobbins, for waiting until rounds 3 and 4 to take your running backs, those are pretty good consolation prizes. Like, compare that to the Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor early tap from the 10 spot here. I mean, I like what this drafter did as well, but then kind of almost double tapping tight end down here at the bottom. I like Raheem Mostert. Will Fuller, for all of his faults, is a good best ball player. They have 3 quarterbacks, unlike the person in the first spot. Like, I like this team a lot.
Well, and he also stacked Tua with Gesicki and Will Fuller.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah, I'm all right with that. If you're going to take Tua where he took him, I probably would not have. You do it because you like the value on Tua's late guys. Yep. I think Waddle's still out there.
Waddle is. We'll pull the draft board back up, or the draft room back up. Top of the wide receiver ranks: Samuel, Gallup, Landry. Waddle's a little further down. I like all of those guys in this spot. So we can be happy with a wide receiver pick in this range.
I'm very happy with like any of the top 3, really. I guess I'm not huge on Curtis Samuel. I like Samuel fine, but I think Gallup and Landry are really, really solid picks. I like the upside of both Hardman and Pittman. So
yep.
Waddle's got upside. Russell Gage is like unexciting, but should get a decent amount of volume. I think Elijah Moore is intriguing. I think Corey Davis is really underrated at this point.
We're on the clock here, so we're not going that deep. I think if we're taking a wide receiver, it's one of the top 3 guys.
Let's go. I didn't want to jinx it, but let's go. Let's stack them up. Let's go Gallup.
I was going to ask you, like, how much do you care about stacking Gallup here? And it's clear that you do care about it. I actually like Samuel more than Gallup in a vacuum. But again, for the sake of the stack, now we have a stack for each of our QBs. I don't think that that's necessary, but I do like it when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't going to force it last round, but when it falls into our lap like this, let's snap it. Snap it.
Snap. Oh,
hell
snap.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look kind of around. Let's see what's going on at tight end. I saw Gronk just got taken.
Yeah, Hunter Henry went. He's been one of my favorite targets, so I was ashamed to see Henry go. Quarterback, I'm going to pull it up just so
been on board.
Yeah. So Bridgewater, Tyrod Taylor, Mac Jones, Garoppolo, kind of who's left at QB. We're not taking one of those guys. I think one of them just got picked. Tight end, we are kind of getting thin here. So this could be a consideration for us. It's Kmet, Cook, Ferkser, Jarwin, Ertz, Ebron, Hooper. After that, it gets really ugly. So I think if we pass on tight end here, we might have to take one on the way back. Although maybe not. With Waller, maybe not.
I mean, not necessarily, but what I don't want to do if I'm only taking 2 tight ends, even though my first tight end is really good, is I don't want to shite second tight end who like. Yep. So yep. I actually do like Jared Cook, but I think it might be. I mean, we talked about Jarwin, and just a natural stack with our cheap second tight end, making that happen. Yeah. I don't mean to be like super stack here, but I think they're kind of like falling to us. I am concerned about Dalton Schultz though, potentially bringing in. We already stacked with Dak. Is there a tight end here that you like appreciably more than the rest? I don't think
I like Ferkser and Cook more than Jarwin for all the reasons you just said. Like the fact that he's kind of competing with Schultz. Like this is a case where I wouldn't force the stack. I would take either Cook or Ferkser if we're going to take a tight end. But I'll pull up wide receiver too. Like Curtis Samuel's still there, Jalen Waddle, Pittman are still there. Like you could talk me into a wide receiver here and kind of punting on tight end. But what do you think?
Let's take Cook.
Okay.
Oh, what's
I
our
clicked it.
Okay.
It's too late. It's all right. What were you going to say though?
I was going to say what's Waller's buy?
I checked that. Waller's week 8, and okay, so cool. Yeah, Cook. We are kind of stacking up a lot of week 7 buys. Zack Moss, Najee Harris, Michael Gallup, like all of our Cowboys and Jared Cook now, which isn't ideal, but I don't hate it either otherwise, because like in every week that isn't week 7, we're going to be a lot better off, right?
Exactly. Like I'm not going to worry myself too much about it, but I like getting a usable second tight end. I really liked, I mean, the tight end in LA got plenty of work last year, whether it was Donald Parham or whether it was Henry when he wasn't hurt, like
or Mike Williams.
Yeah, exactly. Mike Williams.
I've been on the Mike Williams as a tight end train for many years.
A tight end that can jump. He probably used to play basketball. So I like getting a second tight end who we feel pretty good about every week.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm with you. I think that is important if you're only going to take 2. Like, you don't want that second one to be Mo Alley Cox, right? Like, and maybe there is some fear with Cook that he's going to be competing with like Parham or some other tight end or just with the other receivers on that team, including Eckler. So maybe there's more risk with Cook than we might have admitted when we made the pick. But
Andy's old as dust. You know what I mean? But you know, I have some concerns with the Ferk Daddy too, just because. I mean, it's not like you're going to have a tight end that you don't have concerns about here. I mean, let's be honest. Like nobody's like, oh yeah, I'm this awesome tight end just hanging out here. So, but everybody's got warts.
But one tight end from this range always ends up being that guy. You know, where he's drafted as like the tight end 15 to 20 or like 13 to 17, and he ends up being a top 8 guy because tight end is just that bad.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, for years and years they talk about the running back dead zone. There's also the tight end dead zone, right?
Yeah.
Taking those tight ends from like 6 to 12. Once in a while they work out, but in general, taking tight ends in that range is minus EV, and really a lot of sharp drafters really try to draft at the polls, right? They try to draft early and then past that range. And so I think we accomplished that here. We see David Johnson go off the board. Not gonna shed too many tears. That's the one that I'm kind
Dylan
of
stings. I
was kind of hoping Dylan would make it back.
Yeah, I think when it comes to tight ends, like if you're going to take one a little bit higher, like in that kind of middle range, you have to be really confident in the workload above all else. Like I think with Dallas Goedert, it makes sense because the receiving options there are Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, ? And who else, right? Maybe Zach Ertz comes back, maybe he doesn't. Like indications now are that Ertz might be back on the Eagles. And if that does happen.
Who's the guy that smashed for him for like 3 weeks? The receiver?
Richard Rodgers. Oh, no, you're talking about the receiver. Fulgham, Travis Fulgham.
Fulgham, yeah.
So
we could see a Fulgham renaissance this year, but
totally. So like Dallas Goedert makes sense to me. Like Noah Fant, when you're competing with Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and KJ Hamler, maybe even a little Tim Patrick mixed in there.
A lot of Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick, the league's best number 4 receiver.
Oh my God. Like, can that guy get on a team where he can play, please? Like, I love Tim Patrick, but Noah Fant for that reason scares me. Whereas like Logan Thomas, again, I kind of see it because it's like 2 primary wide receivers, so pass catching running backs for sure, but Thomas is going to get down the field more than those running backs are. And if they are smart and they use enough play action, enough like jet motion with Samuel, like Logan's going to come open on a lot of routes. And so I like that pick as well. But Fant worries me. Gesicki, like I am terrified of considering all the receivers they added. So that's the kind of way I approach those mid-tier tight ends is pick like the 2 that you think are really going to see the volume and then kind of say no thanks to everybody else.
For sure. Okay, so we're 3-4 picks away.
Coming up here pretty soon. And, you know, running back has thinned out a lot since we kind of talked about it. We are looking at the pass catching guys now. Hines, Bernard, McKissick, James White, and then the Alexander Madison, Darrington Evan types, the ones who need an injury to be relevant. So
I think Nyheim Hines actually makes quite a bit of sense. There's certainly reason to think that he won't have the year he did last year because Philip Rivers was throwing to him last year. But I think his role is really secure as like a pass catching guy and a guy that just can give you a couple points every week. You know, I kind of like him. Other guys on this list,
It's ugly, man. Like at this point, like, yeah, if you're not going to take, this is kind of the same thing we were just talking about with tight ends. You pick which two of these running backs you think are going to be relevant, and then you say no thanks to the rest, and then really throw darts later. Yeah. And our roster has 3 running backs so far. We probably only need 2 more for sure.
Yeah.
With Najee, Darrell Henderson, and Zack Moss. So, like,
yeah,
maybe
I wouldn't
one of them signs.
Guys, I feel good about only because like Henderson is not. He's not in the trust tree. You know what I mean? Like I feel good about him upside, but like, do I trust the man? Not as much as like some other RB2s that we might have. But certainly, I mean, there's receivers on this list I still like. Like I think Pittman's got a lot of upside. We talked about Corey Davis.
Darnell Mooney we mentioned earlier, although Mooney just got drafted. So that's actually something I would have been interested in, is like the Bears receiver stack without the QB.
Yeah.
Because if those guys are the primary targets there, like I don't trust Cole Kmet or Jimmy Graham to really push them for work. Like even if you don't have the quarterback, if you just get the best Bears receiver every week, like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But we're on the clock here. So I think wide receiver is still pretty deep. Like Hines is kind of staring at us.
I do too. So I think it's Hines, and then we try to take a running back on the way back. Like we're feeling good about our tight ends. We're feeling good about our quarterbacks. So kind of at this point, it's like wide receiver and running back. Let's take the best, and I think we have a better chance of coming back and getting a receiver that we like. So
well, and we have 4 receivers here already. You only need to start 2 in any given week, and chances are between Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, Robbie Anderson, and Michael Gallup, like that's going to cover our 2 wide receiver spots over the guys who are also available here most weeks. Not every week, but most weeks.
Yeah,
and so we're really just kind of filling in the gaps at this point.
Yeah, and we have the receiver buys. All 4 of our receivers have different buys, which helps cover us a little bit.
Totally. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so that's #good, I think.
Yeah, Kendon Drake went right after Nyheim Hines, and I mentioned Chase Edmonds as a player I like earlier, but what's your take on that Arizona running back field? What's your take on Drake versus Chase Edmonds?
Oh, I mean, I'm not on Team Drake. I mean, you know, the guy goes to Vegas, which again is a team that we think.
Oh my God, I meant James Conner, but Jesus, thank you for correcting me.
No. Conner, as a Steelers fan, I think he's washed, bro. Like
I agree.
He's got 0 juice left, and you know they're basically just replacing Kenyon Drake with a slower Kenyon Drake, which is very difficult to do. In fact, so yeah, I'm not a big believer. I tend to like Edmonds. I know he's failed in his role as a bell cow. I think that Conner could potentially just like scavenge him at the goal line and just he can make Edmonds' life worse and his fantasy output worse without like really being that usable. I see a lot of sharp people on James Conner, so I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, he's trash. Like I'm open to other viewpoints, but as somebody who really watched him in Pittsburgh, he's got no juice left. And at some point, to be a running back, you have to have some juice, and he just ain't got it.
Yeah, that's the way I see it too, which is a shame because Connor's a really easy guy to root for. Like, I hope that he's good. I hope that I'm wrong. And I do think that there's a chance that he just becomes the goal line back there. And if that happens, then and that offense is really good, like maybe he is usable in best ball, especially as late as he's going. I do want to get back to Drake just because, I mean, I brought him up on accident, but that is kind of an interesting situation now with him versus Josh Jacobs. But let's sort out our pick before we get into that discussion. Who's standing out to you here? Running back, I mean, we could go back with another receiver like McKissick or White, or we could just hope and pray for one of these like real dart throws later. Like the wide receivers here are still good.
I think we dart throw later because we got our boring pass catching guy. Oh, did Pittman just go? Son of a biscuit. That's who I really wanted. That's I'm tilting. So
now what? Yeah, this is what happens, man. Like you get sniped and then you have to piece it together after that. Like where does your brain go now that you just missed on Pittman?
I can't go on.
All right. End broadcast.
Yeah, I cannot go on. Leave me behind. I think there's a lot of value in Devontae Parker. I actually think Parker's going too late. I don't actually mind T.Y. Hilton, but I feel like Parker and there ain't nobody
speaking
else.
of juice, like that's one thing I expect for Parker over Hilton is that Parker's be healthier. and on a better team or a more pass-heavy team. I don't know. Is that the pick you want, or you want to do something else?
Yeah, I think I like Parker. Parker. I'm not really in on Bateman just because of that offensive situation.
It's a shame too, because he's a good player too.
Yeah, he's a really good player, but yeah, fantasy wise, I'm just not there. I think, Parker was going like in the third round like 2 years ago or something like that. I don't expect him to be an alpha. They have a lot of mouths to feed, but I think he can still have spike weeks. I think he's still a good player. But Pittman, I wanted Pittman, bro. I didn't even want to say it out loud, but Michael Pittman, I think he just showed flashes of what he can do. And Carson Wentz is a guy that he's just been awful. I mean, he's been really, since he tore his ACL, he's just not been good. But I would not be at all shocked if he just got in a different situation and he was able to come back. Like, I'm not like thinking it's likely to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, somebody there is going to be the alpha. And I kind of just made my case to fade T.Y. Hilton. It could be T.Y. Hilton. But the fact that Pittman and Paris Campbell are both younger, fresher legs in theory. My concern with them is kind of the same one that you have with Rashad Bateman, is how much are the Colts actually going to pass? And because there's so many viable targets there who are similar in value between Hilton, Pittman, the tight ends, Naheem Hines, Paris Campbell, like best ball is one place where you can draft these guys, but in a managed league, I'll probably be steering pretty far away from all of the Indianapolis Colts receivers. Yeah. Except for like that one player you plant your flag and be like, I think it's going to be Pittman. That's if that receiver gets to me, I'll draft him. But if not, like, I'm probably just not going to end up with anybody from that team. Yeah.
I mean, Hilton's he's on the downside, man. Like, he's been a good player for a long time. He's just on the downside, especially when a receiver who he relies on speed. I mean, that's always been his game. He's not like this uber technical route runner. He doesn't jump over people, and you get to an age where you lose that half step, and it changes what makes you special. I think Pittman has the size and the speed to kind of take over an alpha role. So I actually really wanted him, and I'm super sad that we did
still tilted, man. You haven't come back from the tilt quite yet.
Yeah.
So speaking of offenses, though, that you want to avoid or want to kind of target, are there any under the radar ones in either direction that stand out to you this year? Like teams where you're like, I think this team's going to be sneaky good and I want more pieces, or this team is overvalued, I don't want as many of their pieces. Like, do any specific teams come to mind for you?
Pittsburgh. And so I'm a noted Steelers fan, so I don't want to sound like a homer here, but I think the reality is that Pittsburgh's affordable. They're affordable in so many ways. And this was a team, I think they finished third in the league in pass attempts last year.
Sure, they talked about how they're going to bring that down. So, I mean, you have to understand that. But I think you're right. They're still going to pass enough, right?
Yeah, they're going to pass enough. Their receivers are uber talented. You can say Ben is dust, and he is pretty dusty. I mean, no doubt. I mean, the guy's dusty as hell. But he was dusty last year, and he put up a ton of yards, and I think he had 33 touchdowns and 10 picks. I mean, the fantasy production was there. Deontay Johnson was fantasy relevant. Chase Claypool is this size speed freak, along Calvin Johnson lines. He's not Calvin Johnson, but dude, he's a baller. Juju Smith-Schuster, where he's going in the 6th, 7th round is fine. Good complimentary player. I just think there's a lot of value here, and I think Pittsburgh gets the perception of them is worse because they start off 11-0 and then they fell completely off, and nobody but likes Roethlisberger. It's just,
Totally agree. They're not a bad offense, and they're going to be a good enough team in enough competitive games to where they're going to have to throw some, enough for those pieces to be relevant. Even Eric Ebron, you didn't mention him, but he's another guy who's just supremely discounted for considering what his production has been the past couple seasons. And I mean, I don't necessarily want Eric Ebron on all my teams, but if I wait on tight end and I miss out on the guys I like, and I'm in a position like this number one drafter is, where you just need a warm body behind Mark Andrews, you could do a lot worse than Eric Ebron in the 14th round of a tight end premium league. That's all I'm saying.
I think so too. I think so too. I think Ebron's the guy that they're going to want to catch catch all the passes. What's his name? Freiermuth, the guy they drafted.
Yeah, the rookie they drafted. Yep.
Yeah, he's going to be a good player, but Pittsburgh notoriously brings those guys along slowly, and he's going to be more of a traditional tight end. You know, they see him as like their next Heath Miller, who can do like a bit of everything. But I think Ebron is going to be their like flexed out tight end for the most part this year. So I'm not really that worried about where all that goes. So at this point, I think we're kind of just looking for guys with upside, man.
Totally.
I think Kenneth Gainwell and Darrington Evans both have a decent amount of upside. I tend to like Evans a little bit more because in games where Tennessee is forced to throw, I think Evans gets on the field in those situations. And so I think he has a bit more upside than like James White and Bernard, where he could see somewhat of a similar pass catching role. Because I think we don't see Tennessee able to just run like they kind of want to. I think we see some regression back the other way, but he's also got massive upside in case anything happens to the big dog, who's like, getting like 350 touches every year. So I think Evans is kind of a nice mix. It's like a poor man's AJ Dillon.
Yeah, I don't hate it. With that said, like, is this a point where you feel like you need to make that pick, or can you kick it to the next round? Like, because we have only 7 picks between our 2 selections here.
Yeah.
And like, do any of these wide receivers stand out to you enough to where like you feel, okay, this is it? And you know what? I'll pull up quarterback too, because I mean, maybe you're a Drew Lock guy. I don't think you are. I know I'm not. And tight end, again, if you want a third tight end, I mean, no, I think we can just say no to that. So yeah, it really does come down to running back or wide receiver. Do any of these wide receivers do it for you?
Is there anybody that stands out to me? I continue to kind of like Christian Kirk. I think Sterling Shepard is actually really undervalued.
I mean, John Brown is here if we want to stack him with Carr as well. I don't hate that. And honestly, that might be, it feels like forcing a stack to some extent. But when your alternative is Darrington Evans or Kenneth Gainwell, like one of these running backs, like I think I might rather just have the stack.
Yeah, I think I might too. Let's do John Brown. I'm actually a longtime John Brown supporter.
He's good.
Yeah, what he does with his efforts. But even looking down a little bit, I think the Packers secondary wide receivers, MVS might be gone. But
hold on, they might have to trade for Randall Cobb if Aaron Rodgers is going to play.
Good point. Very, very good point. But I think I'm very good with the stack right here.
Yeah. So we got John Brown. Actually, I like how that worked out. I wasn't really considering it, and then I rarely draft Derek Carr, so that's probably why I don't think about it. But then I'm like, oh wait, we could stack here. Maybe we should do that.
No, John Brown is a quality football player. Like, yeah, he's just good.
So we've only got 3 picks left here. Okay. Let's audit the team real quick. Let's just do it over here so we can see.
Yeah, and you can bring up
in order.
The thing that you bring up, the recommendations. Can you do that again for the crowd?
For the recommendations.
The recommendations of like roster construction.
Yes, good call. And we've hit our 3 quarterbacks. We've hit our 2 to 3 tight ends with Waller. And so looking at the roster, we've got 4 running backs and we've got 6 wide receivers. So I think we're pretty well covered at wide receiver. I think this next pick probably should be a running back. And again, like
got snake from us, my friend.
James White, I think is a good value here. Although again, because we drafted Naheem Hines 2 rounds earlier, we don't want 2 of that type of player.
Yeah.
So I think we are kind of swinging for more of an upside pick here with a running back. And I'll pull running backs up here because we only have 4 left in the queue. Going a little deeper here, Rashad Penny, Salvon Ahmed, Xavier Jones.
Add Ahmed to the list, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know if you're a Malcolm Brown guy, Jerick McKinnon. Like McKinnon, if CEH gets hurt, like there's some upside there. Marlon Mack, although I don't think we want Mack if we've already drafted Hines. I'm going to take him out.
We don't want it. I would add McKinnon. What does their depth chart look like? It's CH and then who?
Darrell Henderson and Jerick McKinnon. That's kind of their top 3. Oh, and I think Darwin Thompson is still there.
Yes, Darwin, our boy. So sorry, it's CH and who?
Darrell Williams or Darrell Williams.
That's right. They still have him. He's such a snake. He's such a snake. I don't.
We are on the clock here.
I think I might be on Team Gainwell.
Okay. I mean, we talked earlier about how we're not really into Miles Sanders, so like this is the natural pivot off of that, or arbitrage if you want to use a big fancy investment.
Oh yeah, it is fancy. So what's go back to receiver real fast and let's just see if anyone really sticks out to us. I think probably not.
I mean, I like plenty of these guys, but there's so many of them and we already have enough wide receivers. Like I think running back is just the sharper pick.
Yeah, let's take a swing on Gainwell.
It's good. And we talked about the receivers in Philly kind of being narrow and condensed. Like that helps the running backs too, right? Because that means that if Philly's third receiver is someone that they don't really want to be involving that much in the offense, that means more targets for the tight ends, more targets for the running backs, more carries for the running backs, frankly. And if Miles Sanders underperforms, if Miles Sanders gets hurt, Gainwell has the ability, despite like perception of him being primarily a pass catcher, of being better than that. And considering he's available this late, it is a total dart throw, but I mean, it's a fine pick. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Right. And the archetype that we kind of got like our safer backups, right? Yep. Zack Moss and Nyheim Hines. I don't think either of them possess a crap load of upside, but I think they're both likely to get a decent amount of touches, and especially in Hines's case, like higher value touches, i.e. targets every week. So I'm fine taking, at this point, a guy who doesn't fit that archetype, but is more of like a home run swing pick, which is why I wanted Darrington Evans. Why'd that guy have to take him?
We could have taken him over John Brown. It's possible John Brown would have made it back to us. Yeah. And I mean, we're kind of living in the moment as we go here. I'm trying to navigate the stream as well as make picks, but maybe we should have audited what these players were doing, like looking at how many wide receivers versus running backs they had before we made the John Brown pick. Like that might have been a mistake on our part. And that's something where if you have more time, if you're doing a slow draft or maybe your pick timer is a little bit longer, you can take the time to kind of review that stuff before you make your selections. I do recommend, making sure you're following what the other teams are doing when you draft. You got to do it.
Yeah, I like what the guy behind us has actually done, or the guy with Team 11, the last couple picks, like Landry, Ferkser, Gage, Evan, Shepard, I think is pretty solid for this point in the draft. I think
so much floor, and in the late rounds, like getting more floor is fine.
Yeah, because I think he's done well.
Like you look at the top, they got the stack: Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Jefferson, Cousins is fine, and then Jacobs, Sanders. As much as these running backs are maligned for their potential usage flaws, like 5th and 6th round, and not just 5th, but like end of the 5th round, Josh Jacobs, like that's good. Like that's good value on a player, I think. Yeah. Good, some decent drafting there. Definitely has been chasing tight end is the one part of his draft that you can see. He's kind of like, I think this is how you do it, though.
I'm going to do fan. Okay, I'm going to take Ferkser. It's like, and not that I don't like those guys. You can just tell that's kind of like he's chasing running back and he's chasing tight end. Yeah, I mean, on the tight end front, I think this is the way you do it. You take 3 middling options, and I kind of talked a little trash about Fant as or talked about the risk of Fant and his production earlier, but again, if you're pairing Fant with Goddard and with Ferkser, like best ball smooths it all out for you. Like for all the bad weeks Fant has, you're hoping that Goddard and Ferkser can have usable weeks. For sure. I like this. The other thing is the ones that went right behind him, i.e. Irv Smith, Jonnu Smith, Gesicki. I have a lot more questions about their role than I do Fant. Agreed. And the other nice thing about Fant is he has the athletic ability to make big plays on not a lot of targets. Like you've seen him rip off like 60, 70-yard touchdowns because he's big and freaking fast. And so if your guy like isn't a lock to get mass targets, it's a really rare thing in a tight end to have like big play ability. So I do like Fant the player. I don't like Fant the situation or the draft cost. Sure. Yeah, I think he's fine. I like him a lot better than like Jonnu or Irv Smith. I'm not on those teams. I mean, I kind of am. I think you need to take a stand on Hunter Henry versus Jonnu Smith. I've been on Hunter Henry. I think Henry's just stone good. Yeah, he's good. Like he's really good. I'm surprised or like a little saddened that LA let him go because I really would have liked to see him play more with Herbert. But him going to New England where they know how to use tight ends, the fact that Henry is cheaper in drafts than Jonnu Smith, I think makes Henry the preferred target for me. Yeah. I mean, I think I might prefer Henry just straight up.
Oh, no, me too. But that's what I'm saying. It's like then you factor in the cost and it's an even easier decision.
Yeah. I just think Henry's a flat out really good player.
Yeah. Like on talent, like I would put him up here with, Goddard, Fant, Higbee, like that level of player.
Yeah.
He's just in a weird situation on a team that tends to frustrate fantasy owners. And it's a new team, so we don't know what to expect from him exactly. That's driving his cost down. And frankly, I don't get it. Like I have him ranked much higher than he tends to go in ADP. He's one of the outliers for me at the tight end position. Where
because you're sharp, buddy. Because you're sharp. All right, so we are really close here. So let's see. So we have 5 running backs.
We have 5, and it's Hines, Henderson, Moss, Harris, Gainwell. So we don't necessarily need to take another one. I don't think we want a third tight end, although I guess we could consider it. But we're on the clock here.
Yeah. So
move McKinnon up to the top of the queue because he's intriguing to me, but we'll pull up wide receivers as well.
I like McKinnon as well. So let's see here. I think I'll ring the bell for Lazard. As
Lazard over McKinnon, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then do we have is round 18 is our last pick?
We have 1 pick after this. Yep.
Okay.
So we'll make the Lazard pick here. I am curious why you would consider him ahead of the other wide receivers there in Green Bay. Amari Rodgers, the rookie they just brought in, Marquez Valdez-Scantling also available. Like that's the biggest frustration point for me with drafting these Packers tertiary pieces is which one do you draft? Like, and I don't have a strong lean in any particular direction. What is it for you that makes Lazard that guy?
I just think that Lazard, he was the guy that they talked about a lot in training camp last year that Rodgers really liked. And he was pretty inconsistent with injuries last year. But when Lazard played, he was getting a decent amount of targets and a pretty decent role. And so I just think, at some point, Green Bay probably has to come off giving Adams like 35% of the targets. Yeah. And I just think Rodgers trusts Lazard more than MBS, even though MBS is clearly like a bigger play threat. So that's kind of the way I see it. And I don't have like a super strong feeling about this. So I don't want to be like, oh yeah, Lazard's way better. But I just think if there's one guy who can like really grow into that number 2 role and like take that role, I feel kind of the most confident about Lazard.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, we could take another wide receiver here. I think that'd be okay. We could take another stab at a running back. And so I put some guys in the queue here.
I like McKinnon, man. I like McKinnon. I mean, just get the cheapest possible share of the Kansas City pie. And McKinnon's a guy that's really shown. I mean, dude, when he's been on the field in his career, he's done it. And I just think it's kind of a swing for the fences pick. But I like McKinnon.
I do too. He would be my preferred choice out of these, but I did want to kind of highlight these other guys as these last round running back types who do have that potential injury related upside. Like if the starter ahead of them gets hurt, like if Myles Gaskin goes down, Salvon Ahmed, Malcolm Brown, like one of those guys is going to become a lot more prominent in the Miami offense. Yeah. Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson behind Eckler in LA, Javian Hawkins maybe as the guy behind Mike Davis. So names to keep an eye on in your drafts, especially if you go a little bit deeper than these. That's something to think about. But for me, yeah, I agree. It's McKinnon.
And let me throw out one receiver. If this draft was 2 rounds longer, I tend to like using one of my last couple picks on Deshaun Jackson.
Deshaun Jackson over Van Jefferson?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jefferson's probably I don't even know if I'd take him over Jefferson, honestly.
See, I definitely wouldn't, and I think that's one of the reasons why I just haven't ended up with Deshaun Jackson anywhere is because Van Jefferson's always available in that last round too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Jefferson's a good pick too. The bottom line is I think we'll see that the LA offense is quite a bit better and more diverse with Stafford over Jared
at least a little bit more consistent, I think. Like I think the highs will probably be about as high as they were with Goff, maybe a little bit higher, of course, but like in general, I think it's that week to week production that's going to kind of tick up. Like the floor is going to be higher there. And that's when the third and fourth receivers for a team can start to become a little bit more viable, I think.
For sure. I think Deshaun Jackson is more of just like you're hoping to get a couple deep balls throughout the season, and I think he can get it done. I think Jefferson's probably the better overall player and the guy who has a bigger chance of becoming like a legitimate weekly option.
So I like to close down the show with a little bit of review of the draft board. And we've talked a lot about these teams up top. Like, you're at an advantageous position having an early pick. So it's no surprise that we like some of these teams. But let's look at these other teams at the back end. We talked about Team 11 being one that I like. I like the way that they waited but still got pretty good tight ends. I really love this Ronald Jones pick as like just for the upside of it. And we talked about how these like Jarvis Landry to Sterling Shepard picks are all just like solid floor values. But do any of these other picks at the end or maybe in the middle, like of the teams who are finished drafting, do any of these other squads stand out to you as ones that think have a good shot of performing well in a best ball like this?
I like Team 5 quite a bit. I think Team 5, they spent their first couple of picks. They got Kyler and Matt Ryan, which I think is a fantastic combo. Got their third quarterback in Justin Fields pretty quickly. Guy obviously with a lot of talent, a lot of upside. And then, two running backs that I love. I love Mixon. I love Eckler. Mm-hmm. And still have a receiving core that I think is just fine, especially in one that you only start two. CD Lamb, Thielen. I like Judy a lot. I like Deebo Samuel. I think taking shots on their core is a little thin, but such is life. And thin at tight end. I'm surprised this person should have. Should
have taken a third one. Yeah,
should have taken a third one. Like Aquanimous, St. Brown. Like, come on, bro. Should have taken a third one. So construction wise, don't really like that. But they just got a lot of players that I like.
I think if you put them head to head against our draft, where we spent a little bit more on wide receiver, whereas they spent more on quarterback, like I don't feel like they gave up much at wide receiver to do that. Because you look at the next picks they got, Thielen, Judy, Deebo Samuel, like are those really that much worse than Mike Evans, Robbie Anderson, Michael Gallup? Like you might argue that this is just as good as our squad, and they got better quarterbacks. The rub is that they didn't get Darren Waller, right? Yeah. But they did get these two top end running backs. So I think the tight end is what is the Achilles heel of this team, and that could end up submarining them. But if Gerald Everett or if Blake Jarwin breaks out, like this is like hyper fragile or zero tight end, I guess is a better way to look at it.
Totally.
And so I kind of get it. Like I see the structure there. And actually, this is Josh Smith. He runs the mock drafts for 2QBs. So shout out Josh. I also really like this team. I might even like it more than ours. Yeah. It's good. But where do you think you fit in the third tight end into this team? Like, which pick would you give up to get another tight end onto this roster, do you think?
Melvin Gordon. you can go by. I think Rondell Moore is not Aquanimous St. Brown. It's Amon. But
Amon Rosso.
I think down here, like I would have tried to make it a point to get Eric Ebron. I would have made it a point to try to get the Ferk Daddy. I think you could have done it after these two tight ends and taken somebody that we like, Mo Alley Cox, somebody like that. I think a third one would have been just a really good choice for that team. But such is life. Yeah.
I think you were kind of right with your instinct in this Melvin Gordon. I think the Deebo Samuel pick could have gone too, because if you have Lamb, Thielen, and Judy, you're pretty stacked up at wide receiver. Like maybe this is where you take Tanya and Irv Smith, Troutman, Jonnu, Hunter Henry. Like if you put one of those tight ends here, then maybe you don't even need to draft both of these back to back, right? Then you could just take one here and kind of backfill that wide receiver position with, someone else like Curtis Samuel. I don't know. Sliding doors, right? Like there's something about, waiting on tight end that kind of puts you in this sort of risk. But I do appreciate that at a certain point, like if the tight ends just don't make it to you where you want to draft them, like
don't force it.
Don't force it.
Every draft is going to be different. So don't jack yourself. I like that he did that. I think that's a good team.
All right. Last question I want to ask you specifically about the draft is our own draft. We did the hindsight thing with tight end for Josh. What's our hindsight pick? If you could go back and redo one of these and pivot to a different position, pivot to a different player, where do you think we went wrong, or where are you most worried with the pick that we made?
I think in retrospect, I would have preferred 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we could have. No, Roethlisberger went before us.
Mm-hmm.
It still might have been better to take one of the quarterbacks like Fitzpatrick, Fields, Lance, and then take a receiver on the way back, and still take like Deontay Johnson in the next round like that. I think that would have, because
flip-flop Mike Evans and Carr, right? These are the two picks. Like you take a QB here because we like the QB more than Carr, and then we end up with another wide receiver here. And we love Deontay, so that works really well.
I think that would have been a little bit better. This is fine, but you don't really get jazzed by seeing Derek Carr and Sam Darnold. You're like, well, let's see what happens. I think maybe just taking quarterback around sooner and playing a little more chicken with receiver, especially considering the format, might have served us a little bit better in retrospect.
Now, with that said, we did get to stack Carr with Waller. Like, that matters. And we backed into the John Brown stack with Carr too. So if the Raiders overperform, and again, if we're talking about winning a best ball, you're talking about finishing as the top, 10% of your league, or if you're in like a larger contest, which this is not, but like an overall contest, you need a top 1% or 0.1% finish. And that's where, like, kind of taking that extra stab on a higher end wide receiver like Mike Evans, you perceive, like, while the drop off from Mike Evans to Deontay Johnson might not be that steep, like, we both agree that Mike Evans is probably a safer bet than Deontay this season, right? There's a reason we took him there. And then, you're just banking on these two quarterbacks kind of figuring it out for you in your QB2 spot. Like, again, you have to take some risks, and the way that we took risk on our second QB and third QB spots, like, made sense. So I don't want to like nitpick these too much, but I do kind of agree that if we're looking for like a better overall team or a safer team, like going with Fields or Fitzpatrick or Trey Lance over Mike Evans, and then taking Deontay Johnson over Derek Carr, like, that's probably what it looks like.
Yeah, and let me just tell you, I love our first 5 picks. Like, Dak, Waller, Najee Harris, Allen Robinson, Darrell Henderson. Like, I feel really, really good about that start. So I think we navigated that part really well.
Yeah, I feel like there is a little bit of a drop off after Henderson, Carson, Dobbins. I mean, you talked about how you don't like Swift, but I think Swift kind of belongs in that tier still, at least from an upside perspective in best ball. Yeah. But like, from Darrell Henderson down to these next running backs who were selected, like, I feel like there is still, like, just based on the offense that Henderson is in, the fact that there's less competition for touches in that backfield, like, getting this sort of potential bell cow in the 5th round, like, I like it. I want to do that as often as I can, because it lets me take QBs. It lets me take Darren Waller in the 2nd round. Like, and this is the stuff where looking at ADP and doing a bunch of drafts to kind of get a feel for where players typically go becomes super important, right? Like, understanding what the typical scenario is so that you can navigate the draft better and be comfortable passing on a position even when it's risky.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, you should always get players you like in the first like 4, 5, 6 rounds. And it's really those middle rounds and navigating them and understanding the depth of like tight end and the depth of running back and where this falls off and what receivers you really like to target in there. Getting really comfortable with that stuff so that when you have a 1-minute clock or a 30-second clock, you're already pretty confident, because it's one thing to have a set of rankings and another thing to really like feel the depth of the positions and have guys that you really feel comfortable with. So the more of these you can do, the better, and in different formats, the better. And I think this is a really cool format. So I was pumped to do it with you.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for coming on the stream. Your Twitter handle is scrolling across the bottom of the page there, at Sammy Reid FI. You can follow me at Greg Sauce. You can follow 4for4 at 4for4 football. Don't forget to head over to 4for4.com, get subscribed. When you do that, you will get a $35 voucher, or up to $35 to spend here at the FFPC to do a draft like this that's Superflex, to do a 1-quarterback draft, all sorts of different options for you from the FFPC. It really is a fun format to play because they have Superflex best ball, which you're not going to find everywhere. And the tight end premium does make the early round tight ends a little bit more viable, which is fun. Like, it's different. And I have always contended that the more variety of fantasy football you play, whether it be PPR versus standard, tight end premium versus not, dynasty versus redraft, the better understanding it's going to give you of football in general. and that makes you a better fantasy player. So do these draft, as many different sites as you possibly can fit or afford to prep for your leagues. It's going to help you. Like that's my take.
Play some IDP too. IDP is legit.
See, I hate IDP, but I will admit that because
IDP, come on.
I know for me, it's just like a brain space issue. Like, and the fact that I hate to say it, but most people who set up IDP leagues don't set it up in such a way to where the IDP players are interesting to draft or interesting to roster, because it's like, okay, you start one linebacker, one DL, one defensive back.
No, that's terrible. And
you have to go deeper. You have to.
You must. You really have to go deeper, because there's a couple elite IDPs, and then there's a huge chunk that are all kind of the same. And you really need to go deeper to like make it matter for sure. I only have one IDP league, but I really like it.
I think that's the way to do it though, is you play in one, because, and if it's set up properly to where the IDP players score in such a way that they do matter relative to the offensive positions. And if you have enough starting IDP spots on your roster to where you have to play some of those mediocre or even bad players, like especially at defensive lineman, by the way, where that position drops off in a hurry. Like that's like the tight end of IDP.
Yeah.
Like
I really like it, because I'm not sure if it's like a superior fantasy setup, but I just really like that it forces you to know something else about football besides the offense. It forces you to like understand, oh, this guy's not coming off the field. This is a linebacker who's getting 3-down work. Oh, this is a safety who they're basically playing it at linebacker these days and is getting like increased tackle totals because they're using him as like a joker. And just it forces you to look at the other side of the ball a little bit, and I like that. So
well, and that helps you analyze the offensive players too, in matchups specifically, right? Like if you know that certain secondaries or that certain front sevens are good against wide receivers and or running backs respectively, then if you have a running back going up against that team, it might not be utterly clear to you just based upon looking at what team they're facing that it's a bad matchup. But if you know those individual defensive players, like that can give you a leg up in certain scenarios. So I think, again, like the more you play, the more you learn about football, and that makes you a better fantasy player in general. I guess since we're talking about IDP, do you have any IDP sleepers? This is some bonus content for the viewers.
I actually wish I did. So I haven't really gotten too into the IDP draft prep, so I don't want to throw them out. But I will throw out that the last 2 years I almost nailed the NFL tackle leader. So you can get these like futures props. And 2 years ago it was, God, what was his name on Arizona? Arizona linebacker. I don't even remember his freaking name now. Do you remember? You don't.
I mean, you're asking the guy who just said he hates IDP.
Yeah,
so
this is actually terrible content. But last year it was Cunningham on Houston. You basically just want to take like 3-down middle linebackers on like teams that run at very fast paces on offense. So they're like there's more drives in the game.
More possessions. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually not that hard, but you can get like really good odds on those players on like futures bets. And then also in the Super Bowl, I've nailed my 2 biggest bets the last 2 years in the Super Bowl were over on tackles for players. I think last year was like Sorensen, and the year before. Yeah, the year before was like John Johnson, I think. But I
just made up that name. That's not a real name.
Yeah, John Johnson III. He was the safety for the Rams in that.
He's not the third on there. Then I know who he is. Okay.
Yeah. So I got there. Why can't I remember the Arizona guy? Anyway, he was a linebacker.
Yeah. One other like very small IDP nugget. I've played in some leagues that use IDP and also return yards, and every year there are like 1 or 2 defensive backs that are the punt returners for their teams.
Yes.
It's just like free points, and usually there are like 2 other people in your league that'll realize that this is like a little bit of a cheat code with the defensive backs. But if you put a high enough priority on that player, it can make a huge difference, because unlike tackles and passes defended and interceptions, like which are pretty fickle stats for defensive backs, like there are going to be punts and kickoff returns in every NFL game. And if you have that defensive back who is locked in as the kick returner, like, again, free points, free value. So take that home if you're in one of those kind of random setups. It doesn't happen often, but I mean, I've played in enough leagues that are like that to where it is a thing, and it's something you should monitor if you have IDP and return yards.
That is absolutely correct. And I'm so close to finding this freaking guys. It's gonna kill me. You're like, just wrap up just wrap up the damn.
You know what?
Like,
I'll do one more plug because we made it a little bit extra time here. Head over to 4for4.com. Sign up for one of our plans. It could be for DFS. It could be for season long. We have betting content, golf content. We have so much stuff at 4for4.com. The subscription is going to help you out in winning your leagues. And then when you do that, you're going to get a free voucher to use at the FFPC worth up to $35 to do a draft. So the draft is on us. You get to use what you learn at the site to crush your best ball, prep for your season long leagues. And now Sammy is going to tell us who the Arizona linebacker is. Go.
It was Jordan Hicks. Jordan Hicks.
Ooh, Jordan Hicks.
My
All
guy.
right. Shout out Jordan Hicks. Shout out Sammy Reid.
150 total tackles that year. It's a lot.
And did that end up being the most or no?
I don't think so. I think he finished like third.
It was like the year.
Cool story, Sammy.
Oh man, it was like the year back when you used to have to go to like Nevada to play sports bets in like Vegas or Reno or whatever. I put a bet on Roddy White to lead the league in receiving yardage because like he was kind of coming into his prime. It was just one of those really perfect storms of like, yep, Roddy White is going to be the guy. And he lost to Brandon Lloyd of the Broncos on the receiving yards prop.
Season.
Yeah. So like, and I remember Lloyd from being on the Niners. And like as a Niners fan, like Lloyd was
it was the Broncos season.
Broncos, yes.
Yeah.
And it was unreal. Like, and of course, like I'm sure that Brandon Lloyd was off the board, right? Or he was the field if you were going to bet the field that year. And of course, Roddy White finishes in second. And it's just like a total gut punch. But anyway, we're off telling gambling stories. Everybody loves to hear about other people's good and bad bets, right? Sammy, why don't you let folks know where they can find you? I mean, we got your Twitter handle scrolling. You mentioned the Guildcast. Is there anything else you want to plug, or just sign us off here? What do you got?
Yeah, that's really it. On Twitter, I've tried to be a little bit less of a jackass on social media lately, so maybe I'm a little bit more standable. But yeah, you can catch me on there, and just doing high stakes fantasy baseball, high stakes fantasy football, and trying to print.
Yeah, you better believe that after we end this broadcast, I'm going to catch up with you a little bit behind the scenes on baseball. But that's not content for this show. Once again, follow me at Greg Sauce. Follow the site at 4for4 Football. Head over to 4for4.com. See everything we got going on. This show will be back again on Thursday with James Coe drafting Underdog. And then I will be back again next week drafting another Superflex Best Ball Slim with another amazing guest. So looking forward to that. We will talk to you all then. Have a good night.